Welcome to WEGeniusMinds podcast, coming to you from the future in the midst of these crucial times of change. I am Paulina Amador, your host, director, and producer of Evolution: The Genius Equation, a groundbreaking documentary. I invite you to watch my film at our website, WEGeniusMinds.com. Presenting to you the most revolutionary scientists, best-selling authors, and futurists. Today's guest is renowned physicist Dr. Michio Kaku. In this second episode, we discuss why it only makes sense that we all have genius potential, our ability to manipulate space and time, and what lies beyond a quantum revolution. Professor Michio Kaku, let's start with a personal question. How did you find your passion? Was there a particular event in your life that inspired you to become the brilliant scientist you are today?
My life changed when I was 8 years old. At that point, everyone was talking about the fact that a great scientist had just died, and they published a picture of his desk on the evening newspaper. And that picture changed my life. It changed my whole destiny. That picture was a picture of his desk with a book, an open book. And the caption said, "This is the unfinished work of the greatest scientist of our time." So I said to myself, wow, why couldn't he finish this work? What could be so hard that he couldn't finish it? Well, I went to the library and I found out this man was called Albert Einstein. And that book was The Theory of Everything. He wanted an equation no more than 1 inch long that would allow us to, quote, read the mind of God. So I said to myself, wow, this is for me. I want to be able to be part of this great search to complete that book, to finish The Theory of Everything. Now, when I write books and I do research, I think of myself being 8 years old, because when I went to the library, there was nothing. There was nothing in the library for someone like me who was curious about the universe, about black holes, about the fourth dimension, about antimatter, about starships. Nothing in the library.
Wow, amazing. You were already thinking about antimatter at 8 years old? You've been on the cutting edge of innovation for decades. What does it take to be a genius?
What is genius? A genius is somebody who initiates a paradigm shift, who changes the entire intellectual landscape just by being part of it. Newton, for example, took us from witchcraft and sorcery and put us into a world of forces that could be computed. Forces that drive rocket ships and guide our buildings and allow us to have an industrial revolution. Einstein initiated a paradigm shift with E equals mc squared, showing that matter in the form of uranium can be turned into energy and unlock the secret of the stars. That is genius. I say a genius is someone who initiates a paradigm shift, a revolution in our thinking, changes the entire landscape just by being part of it.
Professor Kaku, tell us, what can we learn from studying Einstein's brain? We know he was a great visionary, but what was his lifestyle like?
Now, Einstein's brain was actually preserved by a doctor, Dr. Thomas Harvey, during the autopsy. And scientists have had a chance to analyze the brain after so many decades. And it's still controversial. But it seems that Einstein's brain was a little bit different. First of all, in the glial cells. Second of all, in the parietal lobe, which governs our ability to process language and also mathematical equations, and the part of the brain that's involved in abstract thought. But then the question is genius made or are you born that way? It doesn't conclusively define the issue one way or the other. Maybe Einstein was just born that way and he became a genius. Or maybe because of his intense lifestyle, the fact that he would concentrate on a single problem for years at a time, maybe that's the reason why the brain, being plastic, began to develop the way it did. You see, Einstein could spend decades on a single problem. Now, some of us, we spend 10 minutes on a problem. We get frustrated and we give up. 10 minutes, too much. Einstein could spend 10 years on a problem. When Einstein was 16 years old, he asked himself a children's question: can you outrace a light beam? When he was 16, he said, I want to solve this problem. Well, he went to the library and there were no books. So he said, I'll solve it myself. It took him 10 years. When he was 26 years old, he realized you cannot outrace a light beam. Light always travels at the speed of light. And in order to have that possible, matter and energy must change so that the speed of light is a constant. And that is where he found E equals mc squared, after spending 10 years of his life on this problem. And then he spent the next 10 years on his next quest. He said, what is gravity? Gravity doesn't seem to be like anything like light. What is gravity? It took him 10 years, from age 26 to 36, to crack the problem of gravity. That why am I sitting in this chair? Not because gravity is pulling me down. No, I'm sitting in this chair because space is pushing me down, giving the illusion that there's a force of gravity that's pulling me down. So gravity does not pull. Space pushes. And that is Einstein's great insight in one sentence. And so we realize that Einstein was different than the rest of us. Same thing with Isaac Newton. What was the secret of Isaac Newton's great genius? He often said he just thinks about something until he finally gets the answer. He could spend weeks without eating, without bathing. He could spend weeks writing on the walls, interrupting meetings by the fact that he's engrossed in a calculation, weeks until he cracked a problem. So that's the characteristic of Newton and Einstein. They could concentrate enormous mental power on one question for decades, if need be.
That is so impressive. How passionate do you have to be? These all-time geniuses dedicated an entire lifetime to discover answers to some of the biggest questions in our universe. It's so inspiring to think that we all have latent savant skills, as you have suggested. Based on your findings, what are some of these remarkable abilities?
One of the great mysteries of psychology are the so-called idiot savants or autistic savants. These are people that have incredible memories. One person, for example, would read a book, put it upside down in his bookshelf, and he had a whole series of upside down books that he read, and he could recite page for page, word for word, what was in that book on page 32, second paragraph. That's astounding. There are people who take one helicopter ride over New York City Harbor or over the London Harbor, and then they get a mural and they can draw building for building the entire landscape from memory. That seems to be impossible. And yet there are numerous cases of this. And so psychologists have tried to understand this. And of course, there's no unified theory. But there's one theory that says that in some people, there's an injury, sometimes an injury to the left part of the brain. And they think that the right brain has to compensate for the injury to the left part of the brain. Now, the left part of the brain is the analytical brain, the brain that does mathematical equations and does manipulations that are abstract. The right part of the brain specializes in artistic ability and looking at the whole object, not its component pieces. And so one theory is injury to the left part of the brain forces the right brain to compensate, and the right part of the brain is more artistic. And these people then can start to memorize these beautiful landscapes and regurgitate them. So one possibility is that we have this ability ourselves.
Yes, it only makes sense that we all have genius potential in us.
I mean, if they have it genetically, gene for gene, we're not that different from them. And so if they have this ability, but because of what is called hemispherical compensation, then maybe we can do it too, without having to injure ourselves and induce this problem. So in other words, it means that there is a genius in all of us. that we too may be able to have this skill. Now, it turns out that people who are autistic tend to be socially awkward in some cases, and they tend to be very narrow and lack skills, social skills, and some of them go on to win the Nobel Prize. For example, in physics, quantum physics, one of the greatest minds of quantum physics is Paul Dirac. His equation of the electron is so powerful and so memorable that they actually engraved it in Westminster Abbey in London. So that ability to concentrate superior mathematical abilities on a single problem, that is within us too, but it has to be cultivated. It has to be reinforced. That ability is latent, perhaps, in us.
Geniuses seem to always be ahead of their time. If these abilities are in all of us, as you just expressed, how can we have access to the future ourselves?
The brain is a time machine. It constantly tries to figure out the future. Now, if you brain scan someone who's daydreaming about the future, you may say to yourself, well, that's strange. The future is not here yet. So how can you brain scan somebody thinking about the future? Well, when you actually put a brain in an MRI machine and ask the person to daydream and think of the future, what does the brain do? It accesses the past. It goes through memories. And then given the memories of the past, it alters them to then create models of the future. That is how our brain daydreams. Our brain daydreams because it uses memory to alter, to create alternate futures. Now, animals have a very poor memory. They rely on instinct. They do not simulate the weather. They do not simulate the future. So some people think that memory has a purpose. You see, animals do not need memories. Animals can function perfectly well in the forest without much of a memory at all. They rely on instinct, not on memory. If they see a wolf, they don't say, oh, that's Jeff the wolf. I know Jeff. I met him 2 years ago. No, the animal just says wolf and simply runs. And so animals probably don't have much of a memory at all. So what is the purpose of memory? The purpose of memory is to see the future. That is why we have a very advanced form of memory. What is the purpose? The purpose is to simulate the future. And that's what separates us from the animals. We are walking time machines. We can't help it. As soon as you walk in a room, what's the first thing you do when you walk into a room? You say, well, gee, here's Jim, here's Jane, here's this, and then you begin to simulate the future. Jane is my friend. Oh, I want to get a job from Joe. I want to make friends with Joe. He's very important. When you walk into a room, immediately, you start to simulate the future of each person in that room. You can't help it. When you bump into somebody, you immediately think of the future. I mean, is this my friend? Is this my enemy? What is he going to say? Can I be friends with him? Can he help me? You can't help it. Your brain constantly thinks about the future. Now, animals, when they bump into other animals, they simply say, can I eat this animal? Is this animal a friend? That's it. We simulate the future.
You have spoken about the concept of digital immortality and a potential library of souls. Truly fascinating concepts. How do you envision these possibilities becoming our future reality?
Today, when you go to the library, you take out a book about Winston Churchill and read about his life. In the future, when you go to the library, you will talk to Winston Churchill. You'll either see a robot or you'll see a hologram, and there's Winston Churchill. You'll talk to him. You'll ask him about this war, this speech, or whatever, because in the computer, you have digitized everything known about Winston Churchill. And so the library of the future will be a library of souls. Now, I would love the opportunity to talk to Einstein. I would love the opportunity to sit down and ask them, Albert, Professor Einstein, what did you mean by this? Why couldn't you finish this problem? What do you think about this theory? We now think that the soul, the sum total of our memories and personality, all that can be digitized. And when the body dies, the personality does not have to die. Because in some sense, you become digital, that you become immortal. Now, then the next question is this really immortality? Well, it all depends on how you define you. How do you define you? If you define you as a biological organism, then yeah, this is a toy, it's a tape recorder. However, if you define you as your soul, and your soul is information, the sum total of all your personalities, your diaries, your credit card transactions, your photographs, if that is your soul and that is you, then you live forever. So once we digitize your soul, what do we do with it? I say, let us explore the universe this way. Let us put all that information on a laser beam and shoot the beam to the moon. In 1 second, you're on the moon. No booster rockets, no weightlessness, no meteorite accidents, none of that. 1 second, you're on the moon. In 20 minutes, you're on Mars. 8 hours, you're on Pluto. 4 years, you've reached the nearby stars. You get bored with the moon and then zap yourself to Mars at noontime. You play on Mars and then you go to the asteroid belt in the afternoon. And then at night, you go back and have dinner in your apartment. You could explore the universe in 1 day riding on a light beam. And this is all within the laws of physics. Now, this is all well within possibility. But now let me speculate. I'll stick my neck out. Maybe this already exists. Maybe out there, next to the earth, there's a highway, a laser highway where billions of souls are laser porting across the galaxy because alien civilizations, they don't deal with rocket ships. Rocket ships are so 20th century. Why deal with rockets when you can travel at the speed of light and reach the stars almost instantly from your point of view? So I think, though I cannot prove, that this may already exist. That laser porting is the way that a civilization, maybe 100 years more advanced than us, that's how they explore the universe. No rocket ships, no weightlessness, no boosters. No, at the speed of light, they explore the galaxy.
When you talk about exploring the galaxy at the speed of light, we've taken a quantum leap, literally. What do you think might be our evolution beyond that?
Even beyond the quantum revolution? Well, here we're going to speculate, but I think that even after we master the quantum revolution, that is the ability to manipulate subatomic particles, right? Beyond that is the ability to manipulate space and time itself, to be masters of space and time. I work in something called string theory. That's what I do for a living. That's my day job. String theory goes beyond anything that Einstein could conceive of. It makes possible, perhaps, the ability to create time machines, the ability to create wormhole machines, gateways through parallel universes, other dimensions to take us before the Big Bang, before the instant of creation itself, to perhaps even leave the universe, to explore other universes. I do not work in 3 dimensions. I work in 11-dimensional hyperspace. That's what I do for a living. Of course, it's pure mathematics. It has not yet been proven, but many physicists believe that our universe is really not 3-dimensional or even 4-dimensional. Einstein gave us the 4th dimension, but now with string theory, we're up to 11 dimensions. This is going to revolutionize our understanding of space and time. And why is it important? Well, our universe will eventually die. So when the universe dies, I say, let us leave the universe. I say, trillions from years from now, we will have technology trillions of years more powerful than what we have today, and we'll be able to manipulate what is called the Planck energy. The Planck energy is where space and time become unstable. Think of boiling water. When you heat water hot enough, bubbles begin to form, and it turns into steam. If you heat steam hot enough, tiny little bubbles form because atoms begin to disappear and break up. When you heat space, empty space to the Planck energy, bubbles begin to form in space-time. These are bubbles called wormholes. They are tiny gateways to other universes. Now, Einstein gave us a picture that our universe is a bubble of some sort. We don't know how big it is, but the bubble is expanding and we live on the skin of the bubble. That's the picture given to us by Einstein. That's the Big Bang Theory. String theory gives us another picture, that there are other bubbles out there. There's a bubble bath of universes. Sometimes these bubbles bump into each other. Sometimes they fission. That's called the Big Bang. String theory says there was a universe before the Big Bang. In fact, it goes on forever. Bubbles in a bubble bath bumping into each other. Now, I find this pleasing because you see, my parents were Buddhists, but I was raised as a Presbyterian when I was young. And in Buddhism, there is no God. In fact, there's only timelessness. There's no beginning. There's no end. There's only nirvana, the nirvana of consciousness. But in Christianity, there's beginning. There's Genesis, when God said, let there be light. So the universe either had a beginning or it didn't. How can you put these two theories together? I say you can put them together in the multiverse theory. You see, our universe had a Genesis. Our universe had a Big Bang. But according to the latest theory, Big Bangs happen all the time. Universes are being created even as we speak. Universes are being created. So bubbles are popping into existence. And what are they popping into? What is the universe expanding into? It's expanding into nirvana, hyperspace, 11-dimensional hyperspace. Each bubble is expanding into a larger arena of nirvana. So here we can meld Buddhism with Christianity into a single theory, that our universe had a beginning, it had a Genesis. But Genesis happens all the time. And what is the universe expanding into? It's expanding into a larger arena. And that larger arena is 11-dimensional hyperspace, the arena predicted by string theory.
Wasn't that an outstanding conversation? We hope to have inspired you. Stay tuned for part 3 with Dr. Michio Kaku as we discuss extraterrestrial intelligence and how the multiverse is at hand. Make sure to subscribe to our newsletter and don't miss our groundbreaking film, Evolution, the Genius Equation, at our website, WEGeniusMinds.com. Listen to this space for all things genius. Thank you for listening. Stay tuned for our next episode.